For years, they walked the same red carpets, starred in the same golden era of Hollywood, and smiled for the cameras. But behind the scenes, he harbored a deep, burning hatred for John Wayne. It wasn't just a rivalry. It was personal. No one dared to ask why until decades later, when a hidden interview, locked away in a studio vault, finally revealed the shocking truth, and it's not what you would expect. Hollywood has always had its share of rivalries, but few were as silent and as personal as the one that simmered between two of its biggest legends. One, a towering icon of American masculinity, the cowboy of all cowboys. The other, a gifted actor with charm, depth, and a sharp mind that Hollywood often underestimated. On the surface, they were peers, but behind closed doors there was nothing but disdain. To the public, they shook hands, posed for photos, and played their parts. But according to those who worked behind the scenes, something was always off. Cold glare is on set, script changes that felt a little too targeted, conversations that ended the moment the other walked into the room. Everyone in the industry felt the tension between Wayne and another rising star, Lee Van Cleef. Born on January 9, 1925, in Somerville, New Jersey, Clarence Leroy Lee Van Cleef, Jr. seemed an unlikely future icon of the Wild West. Yet with his hawk-like features, steely gaze, and unmistakable presence, he would carve out a unique place in Hollywood history, not as the classic hero, but as one of cinema's most unforgettable anti-heroes. Van Cleef's path to stardom wasn't straightforward. After graduating high school, he served in the U.S. Navy during World War II, where he worked on a submarine chaser and later a minesweeper. He was honorably discharged with a Bronze Star, a symbol of courage that would echo in many of the tough, battle-hardened characters he would later portray. Returning from war, Van Cleef began his acting career on stage before being discovered by a talent scout. He made his film debut in 1952's High Noon, playing a silent yet menacing gunslinger, despite not uttering a word. He made an indelible mark. Hollywood quickly recognized that Van Cleef's angular features and piercing eyes made him perfect for villainous roles. Throughout the 1950s and early 1960s, he was frequently cast as the bad guy in a string of westerns and war films, often in supporting roles. But just when his career seemed typecast and fading, fate and a visionary Italian director intervened. In 1965, Sergio Leone cast Van Cleef opposite Clint Eastwood in For a Few Dollars More, catapulting him to international fame. A year later, Van Cleef starred as the cunning Angel Eyes in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, cementing his legacy in the spaghetti western genre. Unlike the one-dimensional villains of earlier American films, Van Cleef's characters were morally complex, sometimes ruthless, sometimes honorable, always magnetic. The 1970s saw him headlining westerns across Europe and Latin America. While these films often had modest budgets, Van Cleef's charisma carried them. Roles in films like Death Rides a Horse, Day of Anger, and Sabata further solidified his cult status. He continued acting into the 1980s, including a notable role in John Carpenter's Escape from New York, 1981, showcasing his versatility beyond the Western. Off-screen, Van Cleef was known as a private, disciplined man. He overcame serious injuries from a car accident in 1958 that nearly ended his career, proving the same resilience he often portrayed on screen. But behind the steely eyes and signature villainous snarl lay a man shaped not only by Hollywood and hardship, but also by love, loss, and the quiet pursuit of connection. Though he often played lone wolves and outlaws, Van Cleef's real life told a different story, one defined by deep ties, romantic devotion, and complex relationships. Lee Van Cleef's first attempt into love began far from the glitz of Hollywood. In 1943, during the height of World War II, he married Patricia Ruth, a woman who stood by him as he returned from naval service and struggled to break into the film industry. They were married for nearly 14 years, raising 2 children together, Alan and Deborah Van Cleef. Patricia wasn't a Hollywood starlet. She was his anchor during the lean years when auditions led to disappointment and bit parts barely paid the bills. Van Cleef was still years away from becoming a name audiences would remember, but their marriage bore the stress of ambition. Fame, when it came, didn't mend what had already started to fray. The couple divorced in 1958. It was a year of great change for Van Cleef. That same year, he suffered a near-fatal car accident that left him with a shattered knee. An injury doctors warned could end his career, yet just as he defied fate on screen, he defied it in real life, walking again, and eventually returning to acting. But his personal life was again shifting. In 1960, Van Cleef married again, this time to Joan Marjorie Drain, a woman who entered his life during a pivotal time. Van Cleef was slowly climbing out of Hollywood obscurity, and it would be just a few years later, in 1965, that his career would explode internationally, with for a few dollars more. Joan became the quiet support behind the man who was fast becoming a global icon in the spaghetti western genre. The couple remained together for 13 years, but the marriage eventually collapsed under the weight of Van Cleef's rising fame and the demands of constant travel. In 1974, they divorced. Not much is publicly known about Joan's life following their separation, but Van Cleef remained respectful of their time together, rarely speaking to the press about personal details. It was a pattern he carried through life, keeping the drama on screen and protecting what little remained sacred off-screen. In the final chapter of his life, Lee Van Cleef found love once more. He married Barbara Havalone in 1976, just 3 years after his second divorce. By then, Van Cleef had become a household name in Europe and a cult icon in the United States. With Barbara, he found stability in his later years. She stayed with him until his death in 1989. Barbara was often by his side at film festivals and conventions. While Van Cleef never had the A-list red carpet career of some of his peers, fans adored him, and Barbara supported his enduring connection to them. She remained fiercely protective of his legacy after his death. Of his 3 children, 2 biological and 1 stepchild, Van Cleef kept most details private. His son, Alan, and daughter, Deborah, largely stayed out of the spotlight, though they occasionally appeared at Western-themed events honoring their father. Van Cleef wasn't the type to parade his family before the public. He cherished privacy, particularly after his career took off later in life. He reportedly kept in regular contact with his children, especially in his final years, as he battled heart disease and complications related to past injuries. His family knew him not as the gunslinger or the assassin, but as the quiet, stubborn, and fiercely loyal man behind the myth. He loved music, painting, and sailing, passions he shared with those closest to him. While Lee Van Cleef built his legacy as a lone rider under the blazing desert sun, the real man never walked entirely alone. Love visited him more than once, and though none of his marriages were without their trials, each woman left a mark on his life and his journey through fame, injury, and reinvention. Behind the squint and the cigar, behind the gravelly voice and cold-blooded stare was a man who fell in love deeply 3 times over, and who, in the quiet corners of a life lived in the shadows, found something like peace. But before his death, he emerged in the 1960s as a new kind of Western hero. His portrayal of complex, morally ambiguous characters in spaghetti westerns introduced audiences to a brave, more refined protagonist. This starkly contrasted with Wayne's portrayal of the noble, unblemished cowboy. The divergence in their cinematic philosophies set the stage for a silent feud. In the early 1970s, Van Cleef sought to bridge the gap between the old and new westerns. He approached Wayne with a script that envisioned a film uniting their distinct styles. However, Wayne's response was dismissive. He reportedly criticized the script's portrayal of the West as un-American, reflecting his discomfort with the evolving genre. He wasn't born in the saddle, but he made the world believe he was. Born Marion Robert Morrison on May 26, 1907, in Winterset, Iowa, the boy who would become John Wayne seemed destined for ordinary life. But fate, grit, and a bit of Hollywood magic turned him into the most enduring symbol of American ruggedness the silver screen ever knew. Wayne's family moved to Southern California when he was young, and it was there that he earned the nickname Duke, not from royalty, but from the family dog he trailed everywhere. Tall, athletic, and charismatic, he attended USC on a football scholarship, but a body surfing accident ended his athletic career early. Still, he remained close to the film industry, working as a prop boy and extra, while learning the ropes from behind the camera. His big break came not with a bang, but a box office flop. Raoul Walsh's 1930 film The Big Trail was an epic shot in a new widescreen format. Wayne, just 23, was plucked from obscurity to star. The film failed commercially, but Wayne's star had quietly begun to rise. It took nearly a decade of B-movie westerns for Wayne to earn his second shot at the top. Then came Stagecoach, 1939, directed by John Ford. With his commanding presence and slow, deliberate drawl, Wayne transformed a simple character into a mythic American hero. From that moment forward, he wasn't just acting in westerns, he was in the West. Over the next 3 decades, Wayne became a Hollywood powerhouse, starring in classics like Red River, 1948, The Searchers, 1956, and True Grit, 1969, for which he won his only Academy Award. He wasn't just playing cowboys, he was embodying an idea, the no-nonsense, morally grounded American man who stood firm against chaos, communism, and compromise. But Wayne's larger-than-life persona came with controversy. Outspokenly conservative, he was an unapologetic nationalist who chaired the right-wing Motion Picture Alliance and supported the blacklist during the McCarthy era. While the camera captured him as the stoic lone hero, the real Duke longed for lasting love, and he spent much of his life chasing it. John Wayne's first marriage was to Josephine Alicia Sands, the daughter of a wealthy Panamanian diplomat and a devout Catholic. They met in the mid-1920s, while Wayne was still a struggling USC football player with dreams of stardom. Josephine's family disapproved of the aspiring actor, seeing him as little more than a hopeful with a shaky future. Still, love prevailed for a while. The couple married in 1933 and had 4 children together: Michael, Tony, Patrick, and Melinda. Wayne adored his children, and many of them would remain close to him throughout his life. But fame soon cast a long shadow. His career surged after Stagecoach in 1939, and long filming schedules combined with his growing notoriety strained the marriage. Josephine, deeply religious and traditional, grew weary of Wayne's drinking infidelities and time away. By 1945, they divorced, a painful break that Wayne would later admit he never fully recovered from. He once confessed that Josephine was the one great love of his life, Wayne's second wife, Esperanza Bauer, was a fiery Mexican actress known as Chata. They married in 1946, and the union was tempestuous from the start. Where Josephine was calm and structured, Esperanza was impulsive and emotional. Their relationship was plagued by intense arguments, alcohol-fueled fights, and accusations of infidelity on both sides. At one point, Esperanza even reportedly threatened Wayne with a pistol during a heated quarrel. Despite their chemistry, the marriage was doomed. They had no children, and by 1954, the couple divorced in a very public and bitter split. Wayne's third and final marriage was to Pilar Palet, a Peruvian actress he met while scouting locations in South America. At the time, she was already married, but their connection was immediate. After divorcing her first husband, Pilar married Wayne in 1954. He was 47. She was just 22. Pilar would remain legally married to Wayne until his death, though they separated in the early 1970s. Unlike his previous relationships, Pilar provided a sense of calm and companionship. They had one daughter, Isa Wayne, born in 1956. Isa would later become an attorney and remain one of the most vocal defenders of her father's legacy. Though they lived separately in later years, Pilar stayed in the background of his public life, supporting him at film premieres and hospital visits, especially during his long battle with cancer. In total, John Wayne had 7 children, 4 with Josephine, 1 with Pilar, and 2 adopted stepchildren. Several of his children followed him into the entertainment industry. Michael Wayne, his eldest son, became a successful film producer and helped manage his father's business affairs. Patrick Wayne, another son, appeared in more than a dozen films alongside his father, inheriting his on-screen charisma. Wayne was known as a strict but loving father. Despite his frequent absences due to work, he valued family deeply. He often brought his children to film sets, and they witnessed both the larger-than-life screen icon and the more reserved private man who enjoyed playing chess, sailing, and reading. In his later years, Wayne tried to keep his family close, even as his health declined. After surviving lung cancer in the 1960s, losing a lung in the process, he would succumb to stomach cancer in 1979. On his deathbed, it was his children, especially Isa and Patrick, who remained by his side. The world saw John Wayne as the unshakable cowboy, the war hero, the last man standing. But in matters of the heart, he was as vulnerable as any man. He loved passionately, married 3 times, and raised 7 children with varying degrees of success and closeness. He was often absent, sometimes stubborn, and not always faithful. But he was fiercely loyal in his own way. Behind the myth, John Wayne was a man forever searching for what the movies often promised: a home, a partner who understood him, and a legacy that would endure. He found most of it not always in the same place, but together. It formed the man behind the legend, beyond cinematic differences. Wayne and Van Cleef's feud was fueled by contrasting worldviews. Wayne's 1971 Playboy interview revealed controversial opinions, including support for white supremacy, and criticism of films like Midnight Cowboy for their portrayal of homosexuality. Van Cleef, while less publicly vocal, adopted a more nuanced approach to filmmaking, often exploring the complexities of morality and justice. This ideological chasm further deepened the rift between the two actors. Despite their differences, both actors left indelible marks on cinema. Wayne's portrayal of the steadfast cowboy became an archetype, influencing generations of filmmakers. Van Cleef's nuanced performances brought depth to the Western genre, challenging audiences to see beyond black and white morality. Their careers serve as a testament to the richness of the Western genre, showcasing its capacity to evolve and encompass a spectrum of narratives. While they may have never reconciled their differing visions, the legacy of both actors continues to resonate, offering varied lenses through which to view the mythos of the American West. There were moments of attempted reconciliation. Van Cleef visited Wayne on the set of The Shootist, Wayne's final film. They shared a conversation, finding common ground in their political beliefs. However, the opportunity for cinematic collaboration had long passed, leaving fans to wonder what might have been. The silent feud between John Wayne and Lee Van Cleef symbolizes a transitional period in Hollywood. It reflects the shift from the clear-cut morality of classic westerns to the introspective ambiguity of modern cinema. While they never shared the screen, their contrasting legacies continue to influence filmmakers and audiences alike.